I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Conversations with Cleo. And I have an exciting individual that I'd like to introduce you to. His name is Fred Lange, and Fred's going to introduce himself and give you a little bit more about why I think the world of him. Fred is an author, he's an executive coach and a coach. And before Fred probably was involved in a lot of these things and writing his book that we'll get a chance to get into. I had a chance to meet Fred in, I think, maybe 2014 or so, and we've stayed friends and colleagues ever since. But I think that every coach, every leader who is successful need someone who is going to mentor and coach them. And so Fred is my mentor and he is my coach. And I want to welcome Fred Lange to the podcast. Fred, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Cleo. Yeah, I double underscore. Um, we all need coaches, right?
Yes.
I have a coach. I'm a coach, but I have a coach, right? The coaches that I coach, they have coaches, so yeah, if you want to grow, you really have to have a coach. Some people say that marriage is maybe, one of your biggest challenges as far as coaching, because you're in a relationship, a very close relationship with someone that sees your spots, right? And you have to deal with each other's spots, right?
That's
Uh,
right.
there's no getting away from that. We're human. And as humans, we have lots of flaws. And the more we embrace those and are open to growth around them, it's amazing how much ground you can take. So, yeah, and 2014, wow.
It's been a while, hasn't it? You know what,
I
folks? Yeah.
remember that because I was on a ferry coming across from San Francisco to Tiburon, and you
hmm
called me back. And, I always talk about emotions, they're 100
hmm
times faster than our thoughts. And that was my takeaway immediately when I answered the phone and talked to you. I had your bio before that, but, oh, I want to know this guy, right? And that's that emotional hit. And we got to trust that. But our emotions 100 times faster than our thinking. And I'm a true believer in trusting your gut.
Fred, you just said something, and one of the things that I would like for you to share with the audience is just a comment that you and I basically kind of dove into, and it's an observation when it comes to engaging. Let's say a manager is engaging an employee, or a coach is engaging an athlete, one of their players. But you talked about the fact of what you're thinking relative to what you're saying,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how you need to make sure that that is in alignment. I found this very interesting. And so we're getting right into it. And so
Cool.
I like for you
Right.
to just share with the audience just some
Yeah.
of those thoughts and how you should be mindful about that.
Yeah. So I could say thank you to you and be thinking, what a jerk, right? Right. And then I could be saying thank you to you, like, oh man, I'm just glad I have this human being in my life, right? And either one, the words are the same, thank you, but the emotions behind them, as I mentioned, 100 times faster. We cue on those emotions. So, I first, this is probably mid 80s. I'm doing some manager development programs, and the managers are coming in with their issues. And each week we're working through, sets of issues that they're dealing with. And, this one manager was, having problems over and over and over with one person in his team. And in between one of the sessions, I got to talk to this employee, right? And great guy, and I was kind of impressed by this guy. So I knew something was off between the manager and what he was evaluating, assessing of his employee. So he's talking to me about all the problems in one of our sessions that we had with all the other managers. And I asked him, when you're talking to him, what do you think about this guy? He goes, oh, I don't know. And I go, well, what do you think about him right now? And, he goes, well, he's scattered. He doesn't provide details, doesn't follow up on stuff. And, he's just the bottom of my team. So you can imagine the emotions that this employee is getting from this manager. So I said, hey, what if you changed your perspective with him? What if you changed it to, give me one of your other guys in your team? And he said, oh, I've got this technician and she's amazing. And I said, well, what if the guy's in front of you and you think of your technician, this amazing technician you have, and see how it goes? And he came back to me the next week and he was like, oh my gosh. So
Eureka.
that's when I really cued in on emotions and I started looking at it, reading what I could, getting access to emotional intelligence stuff. Um, and I won't go much further, but there's a study out there that was done in the 60s, blue eyes, brown eyes. And
Hmm.
the teachers favored one color eye for a week, and then the next week favored another color eye. And those expectations and those emotions changed the behavior of those kids. And it was also the teacher's assessment. So there's some research that was done out there about that. So our emotions that we have are 100 times faster. And that goes with anybody that you're talking to.
It's amazing how your emotions just resonate more so than your words that you just said. It makes me, when we had that conversation, I thought about some of my opportunities to engage some of the people that worked with me or some of my peers that my words did not match my thoughts. And I'm sure they saw that. Or
Yeah.
I'm sure in my delivery of whatever engagement I was trying to, to participate with these guys or something I was trying to convey, probably how can I say this, was not maybe misconstrued, but they're watching my emotions. They're
Yeah.
watching my physical, facial, of course, attributes and reactions, and then trying to match that with my words. And so no wonder it didn't go well.
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah. And I have to do it myself, particularly when I'm working with athletes, because I'll see them on the field, I'll see their moves, I'll see what's going on with them, and then I'll have a coaching session with them. You know, um, I've got to believe in them.
Right.
If I'm not in a place where I can believe in them, that's not going to be a good coaching session. And that's one of the things I do now. Every coaching session, we start with doing 10 breaths, box breaths, inhale, count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 8, then quiet for a count of 4. We do 10 of those. And that's just a way for us both to kind of get in sync with each other and
Right.
clean the emotional slate.
Let's talk about your new book, and I have it
Sure.
right here. It's the athletes, of course, mindfulness and mindset. And those who are interested in getting this book, Fred, where can they get it?
Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
if you go to Amazon, if you type in my name, Fred Lange, that's the quickest way to it. If you type in athletes minds, mindfulness and mindset, you'll probably get 5, 6 different books. Mine will be there, but if you want to get it right first, just type in Fred Lange and you'll get the book.
you bet. And also, before we end the podcast, we'll give people an opportunity to figure out how they need to get in contact with you. But
Sure.
Fred, one of the things is that as I look at your book, it's a workbook. And you're process guy and sequential, and these are things that are very essential because it's no matter how much athletic ability you may have, it's this between the ears
Yeah.
to get that right. And I wish I had something like that when I was, of course, playing sports, of course, in high school and college and afterwards. But why should coaches and athletes be interested in this book?
Well, first off, in the Olympics in the 1960s, we started doing this work, right? So it's not something that's brand new. Um, and the good thing is in the last 15 years, we've done so much work in brain research that we're
Hmm.
validating a lot of the stuff that we found out in the 60s and 70s. So I just want to start there because a lot of times people start to look at mindfulness or mindset and they have a assumption that we're kind of getting a little bit out on skinny branches
Right.
versus, oh my gosh, I heard this said, if you're not working on your mind, you're falling behind. And, with athletes right now, they're doing this work in club teams, and teenagers, and they're now getting into high schools. And now it's, it's part of it. There's usually a sports psychologist or something like that on the staff of a lot of the D1 schools, some D2s and some D3s as well. So to answer your question, why get into this? Well, at that level of sport, if you ask any of the athletes, and you can do the same thing in businesses and managers as well,
That's
it's
right.
it's less about what you know, and it's more about what you know how to respond and react with that knowledge. So, um, athletes, how important is your mindset as compared to your abilities? They'll tell you 70%, 80%, 90% at the collegiate level. You take an executive, how important is your mindset with regard to your team? They'll tell you, 100%, 99%. So we know that that's an area that is very important. Now, how do you get to it? How
Right.
do you, what's the barbells that you need to lift in order to train your mind? And that's why I came up with the book was, there was different processes that I was using. Some started all the way back in business years ago. And I started using those in the collegiate sports arena and realized, okay, here's honing them down to really kind of succinct practices that someone could go through and get themselves with a strong practice in that area. So desire, fear, confidence, their overall mindfulness practices, mindset. Um, you know, so that's what the workbook was about, and why people should be concerned about it is, that's the thing that stops it. If you want to perform at a high level, what stops you? It's your thoughts.
It's your thoughts. It's how you think about something.
So if you can, and
Mhm.
the research has said, look, we have 70,000 thoughts in a day. 70,000, right?
Yeah.
There's no way in heck that you're going to be able to concentrate on 70,000 thoughts. So our brains are pretty effective at narrowing in on different thoughts. And if you look back through a day and talk to somebody about their day, like, okay, what were your thoughts today, manager or athlete? The thoughts that'll come first are the mistakes that they made. They did a drill, and in the drill, they
Mhm.
made this mistake. They did a presentation and had this mistake. They were in a meeting, and the person presenting had this error, right? Those are the things that they focus in on of the 70,000 thoughts. So what they're feeding their mind and what they're focusing on is the mistake, right? Definitely erodes confidence, particularly if it applies to them, right? But if it's their team, it would erode confidence in their overall team, what they think of their team and so on. So a little practice that's in the workbook, little
Right.
practice is at the end of your meeting, at the end of a 15-minute drill, 10-minute drill, find the one thing in that you thought was well done, whether it's
Mhm.
yourself, if you're part of your team, take that away. Put your focus in on that. That builds confidence over time. So little things like that in the workbook are structures that are available for people to look at and say, okay, how do I work my mindset? How do I work my mindfulness in order to be on top of and be at my best performance?
What I love about your book is not only is just about process, it's about application, right? It's
Right.
about the applying the process and applying it, of course, continuously, meticulously, and learning from it. There's a quote that basically talks about the fact that, most people are really intrigued and want to celebrate the outcome, but they do not want to concern themselves with the process,
Right.
which is the work. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
That's really the commitment. Um, the question I have for you is this. When it comes to committing people to the process and the work that you're doing with universities and other teams, what are some of the things that you are finding to help them overcome the fact that this is hard? This is redundant, or this is
Yeah.
something that I might not have been used to applying in such a robust manner and rigorous as you're asking me to do. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you, of course, that helps you and in this book overcome those things?
Yeah, so I think the second chapter in the book is about desire. And it's there because that's the first thing you got to turn up, is you got to turn up your desire. what do you dream for? What are you passionate about? Where do you want to go? You got to get that desire up. And I focus in more on the emotional side of it, because that's usually what trumps us up, and it's usually what's ahead of us. So if you get a pretty good read on what your like key two or three emotions are and the intentions that come out of it, got to turn up desire. So when you turn up desire, that includes purpose. And if your purpose is big enough, you'll go through anything. You know, what was it? Steve Jobs, I think early on when he started the company, their theme was change the world. You know, and yeah, we've had the analogy: are you laying brick or are you building a cathedral?
That's correct.
But one of my consultants that worked for me worked early on at Apple, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, the place was amazing to work at because that's what we're up to. Yeah, we were building computers, but we're out to change the world, right?" Very, very different perspective. So in my book, I talk about desire, and I go through a process for the individual to come up with where's their desire. Once you have desire, now you've got the energy to actually go forward. But then you have to ask the next question that comes with desire is belief.
Yes.
And belief often gets negated or thwarted by fear. So you got to do the work of belief so you don't get stopped in the middle. And I'll come back to kind of the growth process,
Yes.
because there's a stage in growth that we plateau, and that usually is where we give up or we fall back. But anyway, before I go there, so with belief, you really have to ask yourself, what am I willing to give up to get this? You know,
Mhm.
a lot of times when I was in the early technology, the dot-com world and stuff like that, a lot of the senior management, if you rated them on the different areas of their life, family came out low, you know, and they just the dot-coms, the venture was eating up all their time. 15 hours a day, 7 hours sleep. They had 2 other hours that they're feeding themselves, and family had to be in those 2 hours. So they had to tell the truth, right? They had to go back to their family and say, hey, look, for the next 6 months, for the next year, we're going to have to really map out time to be with each other, right? Because this thing's got a priority. And if I don't put attention on it, it's going to die, right? I have to keep focus on this thing right now because it's in a startup phase. Well, being able to turn around and say, yeah, when it comes to desire, my desire, and I really believe and I have a dream to do this, you have to ask the next question is believing in yourself. And what are you willing to give up to have that belief? For a student athlete, is it okay in season that, they get a B in this course versus an A, right? They're going to ask those kind of concrete things for themselves. Otherwise, in the middle of it, they'll have an expectation that's unfulfilled and they'll get disconnected from their desire.
Tell me about this issue of fear, and of course, a very strong emotion, a very strong impediment and a challenge that prevents us from, taking it to the next level, and not just from an athlete, but also in the business world, within your workbook and construct. What are some of the things that you, of course, outline here to be able to address that?
So it's kind of like our emotional systems are outdated. We designed this thing, thousands of years ago, and fear was a way to save ourselves, from the saber-toothed tiger or whatever you want to call it. It turned on a whole bunch of things in our body that by and large we don't need now. So fear turns on adrenaline, you lose your outside focus, your focus comes very narrow, and all of that. All right. And you go through a period of adrenaline, high adrenaline, it affects your thinking and your processing. But pretty much now, you start asking people what were they afraid of? It's not about a saber-toothed tiger. What they're afraid of is a unwanted outcome.
Right.
So the attention's on an outcome. And if you replace the unwanted outcome with a desired outcome, that can change things. Even more powerful is to change it to a desired growth. And so now it's not tied to the outcome. So I can transform a fear into inspiration if I turn it around and make it something I'm growing at. I don't like the word hard much, particularly in growth. I'll change it to challenge. You know,
Challenge. Hmm.
yeah, if you say to yourself, oh man, I've got this really hard thing I got to do, right? Man, you've already turned on a whole bunch of fear in your body, right? You've turned on hesitation, which is the turning on of fear. But if I turn around and say, man, I got this challenge, right? That changes your whole emotional response to what you're about to take on. Before a game, I'll go around and ask the athletes one-on-one, you excited or are you nervous? And if they say they're excited, I know they've got a positive future in front of them. If they're nervous, I already know they're in some level of fear. And I'll ask them, well, what could you be excited about? What could you get out of this thing? I'll get them looking at how could I switch this? How could I transform this into something that's, I want? It's a desire I have. So that was kind of a long-winded answer. I hope.
Well, it's the thing that the
So
thing
fear is
that
complicated.
well, it's complicated, but you talked about the mindfulness aspects to understand fear and to face fear, and also the mindset and your perspective and how you look at a thing is what I sense from your answer, which I do want to talk about. Just a few more questions for you. I
Sure.
want to ask you, when I was involved in sports and being highly competitive, there was this little bit of this conflict between being competitive and, and of course, being emotional. And
Yeah.
and as you talk about your book and your workbook, your guide, I call it construct, but this process to tap into gain greater emotional intelligence and self-awareness of your emotions to manage that. Do you sense any conflict today in the sports world and arena that you're involved in about the fact that, well, that person's too emotional, and as opposed to the fact that be aware of your emotions, and being aware is being good to be able to tap into the things that you need to do and not let your emotions be something that detracts, but also fuel you forward.
Yeah. So I love emotions being driven up, right?
Hmm.
Uh, to the level that you're comfortable with them. Um, and to the level that they support your performance, you know, and if you're in a team, it supports the performance of the team. There's a number of we're in, the basketball season, number of professional basketball players that their emotions go too far and it distracts from the overall performance of the team. That's when you've gone too far, right? Um, you know, Here locally, Golden State Warriors, I think Draymond, I think he was suspended for, I don't know, six, seven
Yeah,
games or something
quite a
like
few,
that,
quite a few games for
right?
his emotional outbursts. Yes.
So the emotional outburst is taking it too far, right? Um, when I've worked with people that tend to be close to that, many times where they are is they're focusing in on the outcome. They're focusing in on, I got to win this thing. We got to win here. I got to get this basket. I can't miss this. I got to make that shot. We got to have an effective sales presentation. Um, all of those are looking at the outcome. And when you're looking at the outcome, your emotions can get off because are you in control of the outcome?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Start to look
Yes.
at control, it's like, wait, I don't control the refs, I don't control the weather, I don't control my teammates,
Yes,
in a
I hear
meeting, I
you.
don't control my, cohorts, I don't control, my drive into work, all of that stuff, right? Um, so when you put the fixation out on the outcome and you don't have control of all of this stuff, um, you're going to have an emotional response that's not appropriate. So if you can manage that and you can look at the stuff that's not controllable, you can put yourself in a much better place to have emotions consistent with the situation you're in.
I like what you just said, and there's a quote that I wanted to share with you, and just a couple more questions for you that I think really sums that up pretty well. And I'm trying to find it as we speak about this. It goes along in this vein. Don't focus on the numbers, trust the process. When you keep doing things the right way, eventually the numbers will rise, the wins will come, and the outcome will happen. And it pretty much parallels when you've talked about, similar to the Draymond Green situation, or
Yep.
individuals in that
Yep.
place are more focused on the outcome.
Right. The immediate outcome, right?
Right,
Many, many times, particularly when I get a freshman that comes in, freshman student athlete, they were the top of the game. They were a conference champion, they were in the newspaper or, whatever accolades. They come in, they're a freshman and they're on the bench, right?
right,
Number one thing that they're doing is comparing themselves. So, I get them out of, hey, look, you got to be looking at your own growth, right? And it's interesting that, after I've had them for a couple of years, they're sophomores or they're juniors, there'll be a plateau in there because we have these plateaus in our growth. Our growth isn't this nice slope line going up, time and performance. It goes up in steps, stair steps.
right,
And so, they're a sophomore or junior and they've hit a plateau, right? And in maybe 3 months and maybe 6 months before they really see a jump in their performance and they start beating themselves up. And all I do to them is I say, okay, if you were up playing against the freshman you, how would you do against them? Oh, I'd cream them, right? They wouldn't have a chance against me, right?
right.
So there is that growth and development. The same thing with the managers when I talk to them about their teams. If you extend the time frame, if you look at the time frame and say, okay, here's what we're doing, and you take your the measurements off of this week, this day, and you move it out to a month, you move it out to 6 months, you move it out to a year, and you start to see that trend, it'll change your perspective. There's all of that growth that took place. And yeah, it won't be this nice, great sloped line going up.
Hockey stick, huh?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
yeah,
You just said it. And it's longer,
right.
that plateaus are longer. That's further the development you get, higher skilled you are.
Brett, two more questions.
Sure.
What is as a coach's coach, what is some of the best advice a coach has given you, not just in the athletic realm, but also in the business realm, that you can share with the audience before we go?
So I got this in my 30s. Um,
And by the way, Fred's just 42.
Yeah, it was actually just before I proposed to my wife, and we had a really short engagement. But and the two are somewhat correlated. Um, I was told by my coach, be with things that you find challenging to be with. And I was like, what?
Hmm.
What do you mean? He said, no, um, to move your emotional intelligence, if you're interacting and with things that are hard for you to be with, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and you're going to learn a lot about the environment. So that would be one of them, would be, you know, put yourself in challenging situations, put yourself in things that make you uncomfortable. Don't back off of that. Embrace it and embrace it from a place of growth. Not from a place of knowing, not from a place of, trying to control it, but just be in a place of what can I learn from this?
Sounds like you have maybe one more as well. Is there another one that you could share before we leave?
I always go back. So one of my toughest years in life was at 18 years old. I had a whole series of things that didn't work out. And I went to my second choice university. And in that freshman year, I came across a guy, and this is a long time ago, and he was in the dorms we were in. We had a sauna, and he was in the sauna. It was turned off, and I opened the door because I was thinking, well, this might be a good time. And there he is in there, dark in a room, uh, and he just opened his eyes, and I'm like, what the heck is he doing in here, right? So I asked him, and he goes, I'm meditating. And I go, what? He goes, yeah, I'm meditating. And he said, in this nice little closed up box, it's one of the best things I've ever done for myself. And he was a senior and, I'm a freshman. So, I asked, how do you learn? How do you meditate? Right. And back then there wasn't much, if you want to meditate now, you can find, all sorts of apps and all sorts of things,
That's right.
on
That's
on my
correct.
website. So my other thing is take time to meditate. Take time to just calm down and be with yourself. Um, listen to yourself. Hear some of the thoughts you have. Get calm. Um, you know, if you do 10 breaths, that'll take you less than 2 minutes. If you do 50 breaths, that's about 12 to 15 minutes. Take that time. We know physiologically it'll change things for you, but we also know from steps that it'll change your focus and it'll also change your joyfulness, gratitude.
Gratitude.
So those would be my big two.
Well, Fred, I want to thank you for coming in and spending time with us on Conversations with Cleo. The name of the book is The Athlete's Mindfulness and Mindset, a training workbook. It's available at Amazon by Fred Lange. Fred, how do people get in contact with you?
Yeah, so inside the book is a lot of my contact information. I'm on LinkedIn, but if you want to email me directly, it's fred@deliberate-performance.com.
Fantastic. Fred, thanks so much. I appreciate you. And one of the best quotes ever is that if your purpose is big, then your challenges and problems will always be small. That's one of the things that you shared with me and helped me in my particular leadership career. And I appreciate you, Fred. Thanks so
Yeah,
much, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. And get the book, guys. One of the best. And a coach's coach,
I
Fred Lange.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
you. All right,
Appreciate
Cleo.
it.
Yep, likewise.
If you want to keep the conversation going with Conversations with Cleo and hear more wonderful stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, then go to coffeewithcleo.com. That's coffeewithcleo.com to purchase any of my books. Again, these stories are built around the people that I'm bringing to you on my podcast from around the globe. But also, every purchase of my book goes to scholarships for underserved and financially challenged students who are pursuing a college education. So your purchase will help them turn their dreams into reality. Again, that's coffeewithcleo.com. Thanks so much. All the best, and I wish you good.